Howdy everyone, we're moving on to 3.4. Sorry, once again trying to scare you. But hi guys, we're getting down to it. We're actually kind of getting this finished. So do know that once again, keep up the great work. I know we're hitting a lot of lectures, but I do want to say thank you. I appreciate you. And we're just kind of rolling along. I'm going to try getting this whole lecture done in one video. So I'm going to kind of speed up, but it's also an assumption that I posted it a couple days ago. So hopefully a few of you had, an opportunity to kind of go through it. And I do know I saw some people in class already looking at this lecture, but now I'll just kind of, explain certain things, right? So please go through it. Let me know if you have any questions. And then let's get to it. And do remember, our quiz is coming up on Tuesday, so keep that in your minds. All right. Okay. And guys, what I will say about biology. Well, I'm trying to think of the exam. Just know, once again, with the vocabulary, there's a lot of vocabulary that will pop up in the exam as well from this unit. So keep that in mind. Okay. It's heavily influenced by this unit as well as 4, which we'll kind of get into. But as we'll see, Unit 4 is, it just has 2 lectures involved with it. Okay, so guys, we're talking about biodiversity. So we're kind of wrapping up our whole idea. We know what evolution is. We know kind of how important, or how species identify with one area and why they're built up that area. Now we're kind of just talking about current biodiversity and the numbers that are affecting them. But to kind of know some terms. So what is biodiversity? First off, we have different ways of kind of looking at it. First off, we have genetic diversity. This is the measure of variety of different versions of same genes within a species. So this is more the difference between, you and I. We are all part of the same species of Homo sapiens, right? But I might have blonde hair where, Mr. Brian has no hair. I tried doing that, or different skin colors, different heights, different, weights, different genetics. That's really the genetic diversity within our own species. Think about dogs. There's so much genetic diversity there as well, but they're the same species. Species diversity is the measure of number of different kinds of organisms within a community. So we can kind of think of this as, let's say, what's the species diversity of Bangkok? Well, that would be, all the humans that live there. So there's one species, but then there's dogs that live in Bangkok. So there's another species, cats, maybe a cow here and there, rats, right? Cockroaches, right? But species diversity is the different types of species in a given area. And then we have ecological diversity, which is the measure of richness and complexity of a community. This is really taking into account everything. So it's not just the living organisms or the biotic organisms, biotic things. It's also the abiotic. So the wind, the climate in a given area, the temperature, the buildings, even if we're talking about Bangkok, right? So everything that makes this ecology or this given area different, and that's all the living and non-living things. So write those down, please. So kind of talk on species diversity. Really, we can kind of break it down to 2 different things. Species richness, which is the total number of species in a community, right? So how, once again, just using humans as example and Bangkok, the total number of, but let's use Bangkok for example, but species richness is total number of species in a community. So that's, you're counting up all the different species that live in Bangkok. So if we're counting humans, 1, dogs, 2, cats, 3, cockroaches, 4, mosquitoes, 5, obviously there's way more than that, but that's the different type of species, how much species are in a given area. Species evenness, on the other hand, is relative abundance of individuals within each species in a given area. So, so this is kind of comparing like Bangkok to maybe like northern farmland in northern Thailand, right? We have much more high population here in Bangkok than we would in northern Thailand. So there's more of a concentration of humans here, where the species evenness would be much higher in Bangkok. And we can kind of look at this picture as that, right? So to kind of go on to these 2 terms, species richness is you'd have to count up the different types of species here. So we have a fish here, the different type of, coral reefs here, many other organisms here. That would be species richness. And then species evenness is we'd maybe focus on this one goldfish and then count the individuals in a given area. Those are the differences. So now, obviously kind of knowing this in the, type of biodiversity, we're kind of really talking about how animals are threatened or going extinct in this lesson. So here's just a quick rundown. I would highly recommend you pause this and look at how many of each of these, different families or subgroups are endangered or threatened. As you can see, mammals, we know there's 5,488 of them. As of right now, we know that's how many species are out there. Of that, endangered are 1,141. So really, we can see mammals, about 1/4 or about 1/5 of the species is currently endangered, right? And you can kind of go down and just kind of see the many differences. Amphibians are one of the most also highly threatened species, or not species, but group that is being endangered as well. And you can kind of just see the differences here, right? But take a look at that. That just kind of gives you an idea of where certain animals are or threatened. So how many species are there? This is a crazy number. We don't know, right? Currently, we have 1.6 million species described or written down and formally noticed. Estimates, however, range between anywhere from 3 to 50 million. Now, if you think about that, you're like, what? That's such a large... Because there's lots of areas we haven't been yet. Lots of subgroups of species. Maybe in rainforest, there might be a specific caterpillar that lives in just one little valley, right? So we don't know the exact number alone. But insects alone, recent data suggests there's 4 to 6 million species. Invertebrates make up 76 of all known species and probably most of yet to be discovered species. And of course, we have to really bring up this and do know this is tropical rainforests and coral reefs are biodiversity, what is called hotspots. Put that down, write that down. Hotspots are areas that have a real high amount of species richness and evenness in them. And so far in the world, we've clarified 34 hotspots. 1/4, they cover about only 1/4 percentage of the world's land area, but contain 75% of the world's most threatened mammals, birds, and amphibians. So hotspots are really just these very delicate areas that just have so much life in them. Tropical rainforests, right? They have so much life in them, and those that we try to protect. Here are biodiversity hotspots here in red. So obviously, once again, more near the equator, right? Give or take. But because they get the most amount of sunlight or nutrients, that's why these areas have the most abundance of life. And probably also considering that there probably were other hotspots, it's just humans wiped them out in our history. That's probably what happened as well. Why should you care? Why should we care about biodiversity, right? So think about that. Why should we care about biodiversity? I'm going to kind of go through them, but think about that as we're going here. And once again, saying on this, the reasons I'm going to give is both, because animals should have the right to live, but even of those of you who don't care about animals, we should see the importance of conserving biodiversity in a selfish manner as well, right? Because biodiversity gives us so much more that we take for granted, that even if you don't care about animals, you should care about biodiversity because it, in the long run, saves you. And we'll talk about that. So first off, food, of course, right? Wild plants could provide new sources of food and more genetic diversity for existing crops. And all of our food has come from wild crops, right? That's where we get our food. Now you can say, well, we have our food. Well, no, ladies and gentlemen, we have about... As you're going to find out in the agricultural unit, humans are very particular. We only have a couple set of examples of food that we actually eat in a whole worldly scale. And not only that, but some are often threatened by eradication through diseases or fungus. We could lose, technically, and there's a thought process that we will lose bananas within the next 10 years. Imagine that, if we don't have bananas in the next 10 years, right? So we need more diversity of crops, and we can get that from nature. And there's probably food out there that we haven't tasted yet, like like noina, for example, or apple custard is my favorite fruit in the whole world. But I didn't know it existed until about 4 or 5 years ago when I moved here. So it's just, that just tells you how, humans don't know what's, beyond their borders, let alone, what's in the civilized world. We use them for drugs and medicines. And then guys, I will attach this video. There's a great video on that. I would highly recommend you watch all the videos in this. There are a few videos. Please watch that one. But more than half of all prescriptions contain some product from nature. Pharmaceutical companies actively prospect tropical countries for products. This is where we're getting our drugs. Most of our new drugs, actually, I think it's about half of our current drugs we get from, I believe so. I know it's half, if to not 2/3 of our current drugs that we are now developing, come from biodiversity or natural ecosystem. So without that, we wouldn't have new drugs, right? Resources often extracted without compensation. Biodiversity, sharing profits provide an incentive to preserve native species. So just know that this is really just saying pharmaceutical companies come in, steal all the stuff, copy it, and then kind of don't pay whoever gave them the idea. Rosie Periwinkle makes anti-cancer drugs. We're currently using this to solve cancer issues, and without it, we wouldn't have it, right? Let's say we have plants out there that we don't know they have these qualities, and we eradicate them. Well, we'll never know the benefits they may give us. We have ecological benefits, right? Biodiversity provides soil formation, waste disposal, air and water purification, nutrient cycling, solar energy absorption, right? And biogeochemical and hydrological cycles all depend on biodiversity, right? The world ecosystem, which we are a part of, if we start losing certain things, we will crash and burn with them. Right? We do not fully understand biological communities, let alone the loss of a seamless, insignificant species can be very damaging, right? Just a loss of a species we didn't think are important, but it might have a fundamental job in this ecosystem, and if we eradicate it, well, there could be long-term consequences due to that. And then also we have aesthetic and cultural benefits. People like to go hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, going out in nature, kayaking, right? I love these things. Without nature, they would be impossible to do. The United States Forest U.S. Forest and Wildlife Service estimates Americans spend about $104 billion annually on wildlife-related recreation. Ecotourism can be an important form of sustainable economic development and existence, intrinsic value. Organisms just simply have the value in and of themselves. Who's to say we are better than an elephant, right? Do they have the right to live, kind of thing? Now, kind of going into it, well, we're losing species. Many species are threatened, but we have species that go through extinction, which is the total elimination of a species. Now, in most situations, there's natural causes, right? In undisturbed ecosystems, background rate appears to be 1 species per decade. So normally in wildlife, we'll lose 1 species per every 10 years. That's usually how many species go extinct naturally. But in this century, human impacts have accelerated that rate, causing perhaps hundreds to thousands of extinctions in 1 year. And we'll kind of go through these statistics. But fossil records, more than 99% of all species ever in existence are now extinct. Very few are still alive. Average species lifespan is about 4 million years. So most species live to, on average, 4 million years. There was a few mass extinction events, the Permian period, which 95% of all marine species and nearly half all plant and animal families died out 250 million years ago. There was a Cretaceous period extinction, dinosaurs at 50% of existing genuses disappeared 65 million years ago. Please watch this video. It kind of, it talks a little bit more about those mass extinction events and the one we're currently going into. Sorry, hopefully I'm not going too quickly, but if you have questions, please ask or pause it, right? But so there's naturally extinction, right? Natural extinction happens, but once again, it's averaged to be about 1 species per every decade or 10 years. Human cause, however, is accelerating the natural extinction rate by 100 to 1,000 times. 60% of all populations have been destroyed since 1970. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. 60% of all populations have been destroyed since 1970s. That means we have eradicated 60% of other life on this planet for human consumption since 1970. The world you are growing up in is completely different from the one your parents grew up in and the one your grandparents grew up in. I could think, back when I was a kid, there was wild places back when I was a kid. Now, there really are no more wild places. They're really just small protected areas. Even the Amazon is much more discovered than it ever was in the past, even when I was a kid. You guys don't have access to the same things I do. You often see like the Lion King, for example. It looks like this. There are these big valleys left of wild animals running around. No, really, what it is just a big guarded off kind of big zoo almost in a way, right? They're obviously big loss of land, but they're all protected. They're all kind of confined. So there really are no more wild places left. If present trends continue, half of all primates and 1/4 of all bird species will go extinct within 50 years. Animals dependent upon them will also go extinct, right? And this is equivalent to other mass extinctions like the Cretaceous extinction. So humans, right now, we are causing a mass extinction event that has only been seen on this planet 5 other times. We are in the 6th mass extinction, and it's all human caused. So we need to go by why are humans causing this? It's really through HIPPO, or habitat destruction, invasive species, pollution, population, and overharvesting. I would write that down because that kind of gives you a idea about the main causes of extinction rates or threatened species. First off, we have habitat destruction, biggest reason for current increase in extinction rates. Conversion of all forests to farmland, cities, etc. Only 1/5 of remaining forest is old growth. That really means that we only have about 1/5 of what we had before. Habitat is fragmented into small scattered plots. It's not big, like I said, it's not these big, huge open areas anymore. It's small, confined little areas. And loss of habitat due to mining, dams, destructive fishing practices. So habitat destruction is the number one. Second is invasive species, and I do have a video on that you can also click in your lecture slides if you want to go to that. But invasive or exotic organisms thrive in new territories where they are free of usual predators, diseases, or resource limitations that limited them in original habitat. So over past 300 years, approximately 50,000 non-native species have become established in the U.S. These are really just species that, you take them in their normal natural habitats, they have other predators that keep them in check. Well, then we move them to a new area where they no longer have that predator and they explode in population growth. Examples of invasive species are cheatgrass, Asian carp, kudzu vine, purple loosestrife, zebra mussels, chestnut blight, and those are just to name a few. I think on the next slide I actually have a bunch more for just North America. Just know there's thousands upon thousands of these. But island ecosystems are particularly susceptible. Example, New Zealand has lost 40% of its native flora and fauna since humans arrived due to invasive species, wiping out the native populations. And you can pause this if you want to look through those, but there's some examples. And then last three are pollution, population, and harvesting. Pollution, obviously through pesticides and lead poisoning and different chemicals in the water kill off animals. Human population growth is just taking over wildlife to make room for your homes or your agriculture. And then overharvesting, passenger pigeons is an example on this one, but and really just we are taking too much out. We're harvesting too many animals, right? Like lions and tigers, for example. People want their skins as a fashion symbol. Yet, why, right? It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's, over harvesting of these things, and we don't allow them to reproduce at a high enough rate, so they start disappearing. And then these are just examples of human-caused reduction in biodiversity, animals that we've killed recently. And then, there is a big trade in live specimens, right? To kind of go on to like the over harvesting, but wildlife smuggling is very profitable. Fur, horns, live specimens, and folk medicines. A leopard fur coat costs 100,000. Mature cactus 1,000. 5 million wild birds sold worldwide each year. Think about that. The next time you want like a pet bird, right? Is it endangered? Additionally, 3 million caught but die before even reaching the markets. Wow, insane, right? Think of that. 128 million tropical fish sold annually in the U.S. And then, of course, cyanide released above coral reefs to stun fish. A single diver can kill all life on 200 square meters of coral reef in one day. Pretty insane. And then, guys, like I'm sure you've all been to Chatuchuk. There's that side street that has all those animals. Do not shop there. I pray to you, or I ask you, do not shop there. So many of those species die, and many are threatened and endangered. Guys, you are the cause of this, right? People who buy these things are the cause of it. You are adding to this global destruction of wildlife habitat. So stop it. Don't do it. Kind of thing. So to kind of combat this, the United States set up the Endangered Species Act, as well as then it became kind of a global thing, and established in 1973. Endangered animals are those considered in imminent danger of extinction. Threatened are those likely to become endangered, or at least locally in the near future. Vulnerable, less extant, are those that are naturally rare or have been locally depleted to a level that puts them at risk. And guys, watch these videos. They're absolutely essential once again. But the ESA, or Endangered Species Act, officially expired in 1992, but there have been some kind of restraints of it, but in a lot of aspects it actually is nowhere near as strong as it was before. And then how to definitely watch this video, please. The U.S. has just the U.S. alone has 2,000 species on its endangered and threatened list, and about 250 candidate species waiting for consideration. Almost 20,000 species threatened globally, and number reflects more about human interest than actual status and ecological impact, right? It's really, when we're trying to save these animals, we don't care about the animals that are ugly or maybe bug us a little bit, right? We accidentally don't put them on the list, but they're absolutely essential to the environment. But we tend to save animals that we want to protect or we find cute. So examples, invertebrates, right? Insects make up about 75% of all species, but only 9% are listed on the Endangered Species Act list, right? That's a disparity, right? Just because we don't love insects, but they are vital to the ecosystem. Listing process is extremely slow. It often takes many years of red tape to get an animal on this list. And then it has recovery plans, right? Once a species is endangered, the United States Forest and Wildlife Service is required to propose a recovery plan detailing the rebuilding of the species to sustainable levels. It takes years, expensive, is subject to political interference, right? Let's say you own an oil company, or you're a politician that owns an oil company, and they find out that this endangered species is on your land. Are you going to want to protect it? Probably not, right? So there's these, selfishness that goes on here. Once a species is endangered, much of its habitat and ability to survive is often compromised. Some definitely more terms that you should really write down. Some endangered species merit special attention. They are given special names. A keystone species is a species has major effect on other members of a community. A good example of this is bees, right? They serve many different species, so they're considered a keystone species. Indicator species is tied to a specific community or successional stages, so they will let us know if something bad is happening in their homes. Amphibians fit in this category, where they tend to, if a little slight change happens in their ecosystem, and they tend to die off pretty quickly, so they're kind of like an early warning system that lets us know something is going on. Umbrella species require large blocks of undisturbed land habitat. Think about like tigers or elephants, right? They need very far land, so we need to reserve lots of land for them. And when we do that, other species then are protected, right? Because they fit in that area. Flagship species are the attractive organisms to which people react emotionally to. A panda example of this, right? People fell in love with a panda. That is why it's protected. Now, I could argue that mosquitoes are probably more important than panda bears are, but you don't see us trying to protect mosquitoes. Of course, and there's many of them, but you get what I'm saying, right? When we find things more cute and cuddly, we tend to want to protect them more. Notable successes include bald eagles, peregrine falcons, and the whooping crane. And then kind of in 1975, kind of worldly, we had a convention on international trade in endangered species. And this regulates trade in living specimens and products derived from listed species. Currently lists 700 species threatened with extinction by international trade. So this is just a list that was globally enacted where you cannot sell and trade them, otherwise you'd be at fault. So certain animals went on that list. I can kind of throw China under the bus a little bit here because they were a part of this for a long time. And then recently they've started to backtrack on it where they're allowing kind of folk and traditional medicines again. But, some of those medicines are, in my Western brain, of course, right? And what the big one was they no longer, you can now sell tiger, right? Or pieces of tiger bone. And it's insane to think that, there's only a few tigers left and they're kind of going back on their word on that, right? China's not the only one. There's many countries that do it. It's just China's, obviously a very, large country on the global scale. And the fact that they're doing it is very bad sign. Japan as well. I could throw Japan under the bus as well because they backtracked on certain whale specimens as well. And the United States is not perfect either. So let's just keep that. Okay, that's it. See, I made it through that decently well, under 30 minutes. Guys, please take this time. I know some of you won't, but I highly recommend those videos I've attached. They will really help you understand many of these concepts that you need to know for your exam, which is coming up, but just to know the AP course. All right, please take care, everyone. Have a great day, and see you later.